I didn't see Donald Trump's name on the tweet. I thought it was would be Obama's rationale for getting out of Iraq. So here's what's going to happen. This is going to lead to ISIS reemergence. Nothing better for ISIS than to create a conflict between the Kurds and Turkey. The Kurds will now align with Assad because they have nobody to count on because we abandoned them. So this is a big win for Iran and Assad, a big win for ISIS.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham blasting President Trump's move, pulling hundreds of U.S. troops from northern Syria. The president tweeting out, the U.S. has done far more than anyone could have ever expected, including the capture of 100% of the ISIS caliphate. It is time now for others in the region, some of great wealth, to protect their own territory, end quote. Here now is Heritage Foundation national security expert James Carafano. James, it's not only Senator Graham. Some of the president's strongest supporters, like General Jack Keane. Jack Keane was asked what he felt about it. He said one word: betrayal. Betraying the Kurds who fought side by side with Marines and others of the U.S. Armed Forces to kick ISIS out of the country. For General Keane to use the word betrayal is significant.
Well, look, I look at it from this perspective: is what are the U.S. interests? You know, we don't want the caliphate to return. We don't want the problems of Syria to spill over to the region, have millions of refugees back on the road. And we don't want Iran to have a platform, a superhighway to threaten Israel, which is our closest ally. I got to be honest. I think if you step back and take a look at what the Turks say they're going to do, I'm not sure it threatens any of those interests. I'm sorry.
Well, you're talking about, sorry, thank you, James. It's Christina. You're talking about U.S. interest. Isn't, working with our allies a part of the interest, too? You had Nikki Haley, the former U.S. ambassador, today, and I quote, say, the U.S. must always have the back of our allies if we expect them to have our back. And isn't this going to lessen the United States' influence in the Middle East, given how much of a role these troops have played over the last decade?
No, I don't think so. First of all, the YPG is not an ally. It is a military force that we do operations with.
But Russia.
They are not no, look, they're guys that we work with because we had a mutual interest in driving out ISIS. That's true. But they're not nice people, and they're not an ally of the United States. And our first job is to protect our interests. We're not betraying them. They don't have to go to war with the Turks. There's no rule that says that they have to start an armed war with Turkey.
Jonathan?
James, it's Jonathan Honig. Thank you for being with us. The president ran on getting us out of wars throughout the world, certainly in the Middle East. So why are so many, even within the president's own party, seemingly shocked about this latest move, this latest withdrawal? Why are they so surprised?
I can't speak to that. What I do as an analyst is I go back and say, what are the U.S. interests, right? Having a permanent U.S. footprint in Syria doesn't solve any of those problems. If Turkey does what they say are going to do, if they do a limited incursion, if they help secure that border, if they don't let the ISIS people that are detained there run wild, if they create a space for refugees to come back into Syria and make a more stable place, then that's actually going to be to the good in the end. Now, if they don't do what they say they're going to do, yeah, it'll be a problem. But people are condemning them before they've done the operation.
James, this is Gary Kalpam. You say Turkey, but it's Erdogan. This guy is an authoritarian. His background is not very pretty. He does not act in our interest, yet we're basically ceding this area where we are, at least at the very least, is getting good intelligence in an area that's pretty much what they call a hot zone. Don't you think just being there and just showing that we are there means something to the rest of the people around there?
Look, I'm no fan of Erdogan. I've been one of his sharpest critics. But again, it is in Turkey's interest to have that part of Syria be stable. If they do the operations as the government says they will, then the process for that are good. Look, the United States has very limited capacity here. The Turks didn't ask our permission to do this, and we can't stop them from doing this unless we want to, A, have a war with Turkey, or we want to arm the YPG to have a war with Turkey, which isn't anybody's interest either. So if Turkey does this right, then we'll actually be better off than when they started. If they don't, it'll be a mess. But again, our goal is not to make Syria the land of milk and honey. Our goal is to keep the problems of Syria in Syria.
So, James, Liz Peek, thanks for joining joining us. I think you just answered my first question, which was, wasn't Turkey going to go ahead and do this sort of no matter what the United States said? I mean, it sounds like they had a phone call and Erdogan basically laid this out and Trump basically said, OK, and that was kind of the end of that. Second question, a big issue about these prisoners, these ISIS prisoners. What is the solution there? Because, you know, if there's sort of a further caving in of whatever structure there is in that part of Syria, aren't they just going to basically roam back to Europe and other places and cause more trouble?
Right. That's a really important issue. And there's two parts. And that's why I always preface everything I said. If Turkey does what they say they're going to do,
right.
They are taking custody of these prisoners. They are now responsible for them. If they let these guys run wild, then that's bad for Turkey and that's bad for us. And so that's where the U.S. should pressure them to keep these people contained, because now Turkey's responsible for them. I will say, though, the United States should have serious discussions with the Turks. There may be some high-profile ISIS people who are really, really bad people who we could actually try in a U.S. court and convict of a crime. If that situation, we should take those people off their hands.
But James,
we
already
can try them in the U.S. court, and they're a threat to us.
Right.
But we're not gonna take custody of thousands of ISIS fighters.
But James, we already were seeing the reemergence in some places in Syria of ISIS in an isolated spot, not in a caliphate, so-called. Yeah. But remember, the caliphate began because U.S. forces were pulled out of Iraq too soon. That's what concerns a lot of people who are looking at the situation. If this is too soon, if we see ISIS come back, we might have to pour more service people, our own people in, leaving more of our people in danger.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know, I mean, the worst thing you can do is look at a situation that's not the same and say it's the same. It's a different footprint than it was a few years ago, and I share that concern. Remember when I said my number one interest is we can't let the caliphate come back, and the United States has an obligation to do that. But this isn't the same situation. And not only do we have to monitor what's going on there, we also have to monitor now what's going on in Iraq and the instability there. So look, nobody said that we're done with ISIS, and nobody said we're done with al-Qaeda, but we took away the caliphate, and that's the key thing. What we have to make sure is it's not emergent. You said the key thing. There are guys running around, but there's a difference between guys running around and the guys organizing a state, and that's what we have to focus on.
It's a dangerous situation. Let's hope we make the best of it. James Carafano, great to see you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.